In this video, we'll see what subroutines are in GeneXus. We'll see how they work, how they can be implemented, and we'll examine what they can be useful for. A subroutine is basically a block of code, which we can invoke as many times as we want as long as it's within the same object. In this way, we can execute the same block from several places of the object, or from the same place, but several times. The subroutine allows us to write that code only once, assign a name to it, and then simply invoke it by the given name. Subroutines can be used in all objects that accept programming, except for data providers. They are as follows: web panels, procedures, panels, transactions. Let's see how it works with a simple example. We'll do it on an application that we're developing for a travel agency. Among its transactions, we have one called Category to register the different categories, and another one called Attraction. In the latter, in addition to its own attributes, it has the category ID and category name attributes of the category transaction. Let's see one of the application's web panels and examine its implementation. In the layout, we see two buttons, one named Change Category Monument in Beijing, and the other Change Category Monument in New York. The first one will have Change 1 as event name, and the second one will have Change 2. In the Events section, we see the code assigned to these two events. Let's look at the first one. Two variables, city name and category name, are declared and assign the text Beijing and monument respectively. Then we have a category variable of the business component category type, which is told that the name of the category will be tourist site. Subsequently, it'll try to insert this new category in the category table. If the record was inserted correctly, the attraction table will be run through, and it'll filter only the records in which city name has the same value as the city name variable and category name has the same value as the category name variable. For these records, the attraction category will be updated, changing it to the one we've just entered, in this case, tourist site. The second button will do the same as the first one, but with different data. The name of the category to be inserted will be Historic Place, and New York's attractions that have monument as category will be filtered. If we look at the first and the second event, they have exactly the same code block. In this case, we could declare that code in a single place and simply call it from the event we want. Let's do it. The subcommand will allow us to define a subroutine, and then we must assign a name to it. With endSub, we mark where it ends. Inside it, we must enter the code that we'll invoke later. We copy it and paste it here. We delete that block in the events and call the subroutine instead. We do this by using the do command followed by the name. With this implementation, the way it works will be exactly the same as before declaring the subroutine. In this way, we've managed to modularize our code, making it clearer and easier to read. Another advantage is that if we need to change something in this block, we do it only once and it's applied everywhere it's called. Also, we can reuse this code through the subroutine as many times as we want, as long as it's within the same object. In this case, the web panel, insert categories, and attractions. Now let's look at this other example to understand a little more about how it works. In our application, we have the airline transaction to record the different airlines with the following attributes. In this procedure object, we have the following code in the source. Through this for each, the airline table will be run through, filtering by the airline with ID 1, since this is the value that we assigned to this variable. We want to update the address of this record using the airline address attribute. Then we have a variable named nextID to which we'll assign the value of airline ID plus 1. In this case, it'll be 2. Next, we call the change name subroutine. This subroutine runs a for each also on the airline table, filtering by the record that has airline ID equal to 2. If such a record is found, its name will be updated. By the time the subroutine execution is finished, and we go back to the main for each, in which record will we be located? If here we have an attribute of the airline transaction, for example this one, airline discount percentage, and we assign it a value, to which record will it apply? To the record of ID 1, which is where we were located before we called the subroutine, or to the record with ID 2? Let's see this by declaring 3 attributes in the layout to show the ID, name, and address of the airline. And in the source, we added 3 print blocks to see in which airline we're positioned at any given moment. We place one before calling the subroutine, one during subroutine execution, and another one immediately after leaving the subroutine. Let's try it. We see that in the first print, before calling the subroutine, we're positioned in the airline with ID 1 already with the updated address. The second print that's executed corresponds to the one inside the subroutine. We see that the record with ID 2 is printed on the screen and already with the new updated name. The third print is executed once we exit the subroutine. And we see that, at that moment, we're still positioned in the record with ID 2, which is where we were inside the subroutine, and not in the record with ID 1, which is where we were positioned before calling the subroutine. Therefore, if at this moment we update the airline discount percentage attribute with one value, it'll be done on the record with ID 2. It works in this way because the declared attributes will be global to the object. Therefore, if an attribute takes value in a certain section of an object, and subsequently a subroutine is called that also assigns a value to the same attribute, when returning from the invoked subroutine and querying the attribute's value, it'll have the value assigned in the subroutine. We've just seen this with the airline ID attribute. Subroutines don't support sending parameters. Therefore, to exchange data, we use variables, which are global to the objects. If we didn't want this behavior we've just seen, instead of using a subroutine, we could call a procedure, for example. In this case, using a parameter to send the variable by which we want to filter. Now let's look at a third example. In this case, we have the following procedure, which performs a for each that navigates the category table, and a nested for each that will navigate the attraction table. As we know, in this case, GeneXus will perform a join by category ID, since every attraction will have an assigned category, and category ID is the common attribute that will allow joining both tables. Let's see this in the navigation list. Returning to the source of the procedure, we see that we implemented 2 print blocks. One will print the name of the category, and the second, the name of the attraction. If we run it, we see that the name of the category is printed, and inside it, the attractions that have that category associated with it. Now, If we didn't want this behavior, in other words, that the join is not performed, but that the category is printed, and then all the attractions are printed, regardless of which category they belong to, how can we implement it? One option is to put this code inside a subroutine. Let's check the navigation list. We can see that the entire category table is run through, and then the entire attraction table is run through, from the first to the last record without applying any type of filter. Thus, GeneXus no longer performs the automatic inference and doesn't filter by category ID. There will be two independent navigations. So far, we've seen different examples about the use and operation of subroutines. Here's a short summary. Subroutines. They're blocks of code which allow us to modularize the code. They can be invoked as many times as we want within the same object. They can be used in web panels, procedures, panels, transactions, and so on. They're defined through the sub command and then invoked through the do command. They don't support sending parameters. Variables are used to exchange data. If an attribute has a value, when calling the subroutine, it changes. When returning from the subroutine and querying the value, it'll have the value that was assigned in it since the attributes are global to the object. If the call is made from within a for each and the subroutine also has a for each command, they will not be nested. In other words, no inferences or filters will be made. For more information on this topic, you can visit our wiki.